Another thing iconic within the thriller genre is the use of shadows and silhouettes, and like the lack of light in general. Often the shadows and silhouettes are of the villain themselves, which is quite fitting, obviously, because usually you don't know much about the villain, and they're quite an ambiguous character, so the shadows also represent this. In the trailer for Seven, actually, the only time we see the villain is just a silhouette of him. We never actually see what his face looks like. There's also the use of like spotlights, so street lamps, torches, that sort of thing. These are quite terrifying because you can only see what's being lit and you don't really know what's lurking around you in the darkness. Just the use of darkness in general creates a sense of the unknown. So like the victims don't know what's going on, they can't see what's going on. The audience don't know either, and especially when you're sitting in a cinema, which is obviously dark, and watching a thriller trailer or a thriller film, it's just quite unnerving being surrounded by the darkness. Another thing that is iconic within the thriller genre is a chase of some sort. So that might be the villain chasing the victim, a good guy chasing the villain to save the victim. Sometimes the victim's even chasing the villain. This just creates excitement and promises the audience that there'll be something exciting happening within the film. You don't necessarily know what, because they don't show you why the chase is happening, but you know that there'll be something that someone's trying to get, or some kind of desperation in the film, which you'll have to pay to find out, basically. I've obviously used this convention. There's quite clear chase scenes within my trailer, which I've added for all those reasons. It just creates excitement and builds suspense. Another technique that thrillers often use to create excitement and fear for the audience is a scream of some sort. It can be any kind of scream, a child screaming, a woman screaming, but there is generally a scream in a thriller. These basically just show distress and give an impression of threat and menace. And in my trailer, I've used a child screaming, which obviously children are a sign of innocence. So by showing them screaming, it's just showing that the villain will be brutal. And again, like with the chase scene, you don't know why the person is screaming in a trailer, but you're gonna have to pay to watch the film to find out. The fourth convention that I've used is the fairly sexist idea that women are sensitive and vulnerable and that men are aggressive. This often means that in all types of media, all genres, that men are presented as the villains and females are presented as the victims. For example, in a horror, the male might be presented as like a monstrous character, with their victim being like a vulnerable woman who can't fend for herself. Or in a romantic film, a villain might be presented slightly differently. It might be the man who just can't get anything right, or maybe cheats on his wife. But basically, more often than not, the women are presented as vulnerable, sensitive, and like really over emotional. So I've clearly used this gender representation in my trailer. Obviously the male is the villain and the female is the victim. However, this leads me on to the conventions that I've developed. So although there is that stereotype of men being the villain and females being the victim, a lot of the time in stalker films, the woman is the stalker and therefore seen as the villain. This is actually due to the fact that women are presented as having being over emotional and therefore more likely to become obsessed with someone. And obviously, as my trailer is about a stalker film, and the male is the stalker, it doesn't quite fit this convention. But I think I've developed it because I've used the classic idea, classic gender representation of men being the villains and females being the vulnerable victims, but put it into the stalker genre. But yeah, I wouldn't say I've completely challenged it, because I think completely challenging it would have been maybe using a female stalking a female or a male stalking a male, but I've still used the opposite sexes thing. Another thing that I think I've developed from the conventions of a thriller, or more specifically a stalker genre, is the idea of watching. So normally it would be the villain watching the victim, but I've actually added a CCTV shot, which I created out of various iMovie effects. But CCTV is obviously like a different type of watching. It's like the society or government are watching you, and it's what I'm doing is I'm just updating the stalker genre to the 21st century. It's almost as if the real stalkers are the government. I'm basically using the conventions of a stalker film and the idea of watching to represent the current zeitgeist. Another convention that I think I've developed from the thriller genre is the use of blood. Obviously, blood and thrillers go hand in hand, but usually the blood is just implied and not actually shown to the audience. So, for example, The Silence of the Lambs is a thriller about two murderers, one that skins his victims and one that eats his victims. And as gory as they sound, there's not actually, from what I remember, much blood or any blood in the film at all. And there's definitely not any in the trailer. That it's just implied. But obviously, my trailer does show blood, so I haven't followed this convention. I did this for a couple of reasons. Firstly, it was to do with the storyline. So the storyline is about an artist who uses blood as an art form, as an art medium, and uses it to paint. And this is a real thing. Like, there are actually artists out there that create sculptures out of their own blood, which is all in my research section. So the idea wasn't actually really to like shock and horrify people, which is sometimes, especially in like horrors, that's what blood is used for. But it was more it's just an art form to do with the storyline, basically. And it's used in more of a twisted way. And I would never have shown blood being shed, because I think when you start doing that, that's when it starts to tip over into the horror genre. Although I did actually want to include some sort of horror iconography within my trailer, because from my research I found that like the second most popular genre amongst people that I asked anyway was horror. But obviously I still wanted to keep it a thriller. I still want to make sure that my film was distinctly a thriller. So by using just a little bit of blood in my trailer, I am starting to appeal to the horror audience as well, which will obviously increase my target audience, and therefore if I was to make this into a real film, would increase the money that I would make.